Okay, we are doing drugs that are good for pain. This is a section in Chapter 7. Page 149 is where the opioid analgesic section is, so you can read that. It's only a portion of the Chapter 7, so it's not very long as far as reading. Here's some terminology. You've seen some of these before. If you haven't, if you're not familiar with those, please get to that familiarity level so you don't get fooled. But let's get into these pretty little flowers. These are about to bloom, and they are our opioid analgesics, naturally occurring opium, right? And so this is where we get our morphine and codeine. These are our naturally occurring opioid analgesic type plants. Morphine is very, very powerful. In fact, so powerful that it's the comparison. It's like the gold standard that all other medicines in this class are measured against. Is it as powerful? Is it more powerful? Is it less powerful? That kind of stuff. Then there's also a number of synthetic, produced and synthetically produced opioid medicines. And so this term opiate and opioid, this is just indicating a naturally occurring or naturally grown type medicine or substance, and then the opioid is the synthetic substance. I'm not going to make you define and remember that. A lot of times these are used interchangeably, which is fine. I just want you to know that there is a separate definition between opiate and opioid as you go through. And the same thing goes with narcotics. Narcotic is the word that's used to describe this whole class. Basically, all these drugs that cause the same effects. Strong analgesia, a very euphoric feeling, and some other things that go down. So you'll hear the term narcotic drugs or opioid drugs. So you can use those. They'll be used interchangeably. Again, I'm not going to make you define and keep those separate. Just have an idea that there's a number of different definitions that are out there. All right, these are our Schedule 2 and 3 drugs. Actually, some Schedule 1 if you want to bring in heroin. Speaking of heroin, they're primarily used as a pain reliever and euphoric type inducement situation. There are some other effects that we'll talk about, but then there's this heroin, which is morphine. It starts with morphine, the naturally occurring morphine, and then it's synthetically altered to become heroin, which really is very, very so much more powerful than morphine, so much more powerful than some of these other ones. No medicinal value, which gets you to that Schedule 1 drug. All right, so let's talk about the mechanisms of action. Basically, we have a whole bunch of opioid receptors, and when that drug comes in here and interacts, then we're going to have some of these effects that occur. Pain relief stops, and you get some processes triggered, and I'll show you that here in a second. The book starts off right away on page 149 talking about the different receptors. This is a little bit more detail than your book gives, and don't worry, I'm not going to make you remember that there's a mu, a kappa, and a delta receptor, and I'm not going to make you, this just gives you an idea of the different effects that each opioid receptor in the body, kind of produce. Some drugs, here's what I want you to know, there's 3 different opioid receptors. Some drugs will interact with all 3 of these. Some are targeted to just one specific type of opioid receptor, some do 2, that kind of stuff. So just be aware that that's what's going on within the body. Other ways of decreasing pain, we got to that substance P. Remember, that's the neurotransmitter in our C fibers, our pain receptors, our nociceptors, crank out the substance P to produce that. So if we can reduce that. And then this one right here, this down here, it mimics our enkephalins, our beta endorphins, the stuff that we make endogenously. That is how we manage and modulate pain. And so just like anything, when we replace something that our body makes naturally, then our body stops making that naturally because it doesn't need to make it, right? So if we put a lot of narcotic pain relievers that are mimicking endorphins, then our endorphin production and our system of creating that goes down. And you can see that that's kind of that may be an issue, especially long term. The other effects, I'll get to pain here in a second, but the other effects definitely euphoria, definitely that good kind of feeling. That's where people get into the abuse part, but it does have some other effects. I think this is kind of an interesting biphasic effect where, you know, at certain levels it kind of stimulates vomiting, and then as you get higher and higher it depresses it. Those biphasic responses are kind of interesting to me. And then this last one right here, this is where people die. This is how people die, and when there's an overdose of an opioid overdose, it's because the respiratory center just shuts down and gets slower. So they just, you know, breathe slower and slower and slower, and they just don't have enough oxygen to live. So yeah, there's that. There are, so the main one that from medicinal or medical effect value is this analgesic, this ability to relieve pain, to stop pain. And there's, like I said, there's a number of opioid receptors. It's either going to stop pain transmission at certain areas, and then it's also, especially within the brain, it's going to induce some pretty significant euphoric and other effects as we go through there. When I say pain relief, it is a strong pain reliever. And so since pain is a subjective kind of feeling, and yeah, there's some physiology, but there's a lot of other cognitive factors that go into this. So what you're seeing here is the WHO, the World Health Organization, and its statement on treatment of pain. And so really, and you guys will see some of the other videos, you know, the treatment of pain really started going in that late 80s, early 90s area where it was okay to not have pain. And so the opioid medicines really, you know, became more popular in those areas. And so the World Health Organization has this 3-step protocol. As you go through here, I just want to explain real quick, on mild pain, the non-opioid would be like an acetaminophen or even an ibuprofen or something like that. This adjuvant therapy would be something beyond non-pharmacological. So this would be some ice. So I'm going to take some acetaminophen and I'm going to ice to kind of relieve my pain. Same thing as we go up in the ladder, as the pain gets more severe or you're unable to control the pain with level 1, then you would go to a weaker opioid, maybe a Tylenol with codeine type thing, and then maybe some other, again, TENS or ice, or even, you know, it could be some kind of an over-the-counter, like a herbal type, you know, adjuvant, something like that. And then we get into this severe stuff, like we have, you know, severe cancer and pain, or you're in an auto accident and have a pretty significant surgical procedure. That's where we get this strong opioid, and maybe you're going to get a non-opioid, you know, along with Tylenol in between. Now, this stuff is not in your text, but I do want you to have an idea of this little 3-step kind of approach to treating pain. There's actually, it's been updated a little bit for the World Health Organization, but ultimately, when you look and see that this is the old style and this is the new style, well, these first 3 steps are the same. Now they've just added some kind of an invasive where we're going to put some kind of a, you know, maybe we'll put a stimulator within the spinal, like a spinal cord stimulator, or some kind of a treatment that we're actually invasive or minimally invasive as we go through. All right, so let's we'll get going through the rest of the way. The antitussive, it, you know, kind of suppresses the cough center. So this is going to, we can take some opioids or mild opioids to reduce coughing. That's what you're going to get in your cough medicines. When you see this one right here, dextromethorphan is going to be in all of your cough medicines, no matter whether it's NyQuil or Robitussin. When you look at the back, you're always going to see this little guy right there. Other harder drugs, especially, you know, when you have severe coughing, they may get you some prescription strength antitussive type stuff. Other things that has this, there is a term called opioid induced, I can't think of it, constipation. Jeez, I couldn't even think of constipation. Opioid-induced constipation. So it's going to, in fact, after surgery, after pretty significant surgery, when a lot of opioid and pain medicines has been used, a lot of times that's one of the keys of, can you be released? Are you able to be discharged? Well, have you had a bowel movement yet? Is kind of the big key. as we go through here, you can see it has some pretty significant effects on kidneys, and then definitely the bronchial smooth muscle has releasing histamine and constricting bronchioles. Not a good idea, especially if you're asthmatic. So again, asthmatics there may be some interaction in between, with those folks. So our indications are definitely pain, right? So any kind of conditions that have severe pain, it does slow down everything, kind of get you calm and slowing. So yes, there are sedatives that are mild narcotic types of drugs, and then of course the if you're coughing and we want to relieve the coughing and the antitussive stuff. The adverse effects, you can see there's constipation and other things in here. Definitely a tolerance and physical dependence develops pretty quickly, so you got to be kind of careful with this if you didn't know already, right? And oh yeah, you could overdose, right? You could put all these little opioids, and man, once these opioids are on this opioid receptor, it is not going anywhere, right? And so this is, without anything else, this is not going anywhere. So when you look at, I have a couple of things on our portal page for this week. I want you to look at this. I think I actually have this actual infographic on there. You definitely need to know signs of an overdose. I will ask you what those are. So know these signs. And then you'll see a lot of stuff on Narcan or Naloxone. So it's not going to be in one of your common meds, but you're going to end up knowing it anyway, just because of how much we talk about it and in this little section on opioid pain reliever stuff. So this is our main weapon to combat and actually reverse opioid overdose. And so what it does is this Naloxone Narcan has the same affinity, if not more, a higher affinity for opioid receptors. And so not only will it attach and block opioid receptors, but when there's opioid on an opioid receptors, this guy comes in and says, "Get out of here. I'm gonna have a sit down right here." So basically, it'll knock off the opioid drug that's on that receptor and kick it off. And so it's very, very effective. It usually happens relatively quick. You'll see some videos. Look at that stuff. This stuff is not in your book either. So we're going to rely on some of these other materials that I put on your in that portal page, so you guys can get an idea of how Naloxone Narcan works. All right, final things for contraindications. You guys can see that. Hopefully those are pretty straightforward. All right. Look at this guy. Oh, some external fixators. And that's going to be a case for probably severe pain. We're going to go with some opioids on this one, okay? Thanks, Doc. Just look at this. I'm going to draw your attention to. It looks like this skin is attached here, and this skin is attached here. So this is like a graft in progress, which looks just brutal. Here is your opioid drugs. There's a whole bunch of these opioid drugs. I change these every year. I took out Darvocet and some of these other ones because I wanted to have in methadone in there as well. We can put fentanyl in there if I want to, but you guys will you'll get exposed to that. Same thing with Narcan. So there you go. Enjoy the rest of the pain meds.